up the Lions?
Yes, I thought that's where you were going from. Have I recovered
Why would
yet?
I talk about the Lions?
I don't know.
49ers look really good, but you did a great job hosting on Sunday.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Stephania.
Stephania. That was well said. But it was the understatement of the century here. Daniel Dopp did an absolutely remarkable job hosting Fantasy Football Now on Sunday. I could not be prouder of the work that Daniel Dopp did on Sunday. To think that, again, this is somebody who just a few years ago was in a full-time production role, has grown more than anybody, maybe than like, who's the most improved player? He's like the Josh Allen of ESPN, right? Remember Josh Allen 3 years ago? People were like, that guy can't even throw accurately. He might be a bust. Daniel Dopp is the Josh Allen of ESPN, has been carrying really, well, me. And I would say Stephania always carries herself, but basically carrying ESPN Fantasy for the past 4 days. So grateful for Daniel for holding it down while I have been away. You guys can probably imagine the reasons why. I'm so thankful to be back right now, back in my favorite chair, but could not be any prouder than you for you, Daniel. You deserve a massive round of applause. You are a super duper massive rock star. Daniel Dopp for president, for mayor, for fantasy football guru of the year. So proud of you, bud, and
Thanks,
so thankful because it's nice to know here at ESPN that we've got a team and that no single one of us is bigger than anybody else with the brand. And when one of us is unavailable for one reason or another, it's nice to know that someone, or in this case, multiple people can have your back. But Daniel, a special shout out to you.
Thank you, buddy.
No I in team, just a Daniel.
Yeah,
team.
That's right. And there is an I in Daniel. I don't know what that means.
Don't worry about it. Don't let the ego grow too big now, Daniel. Don't let the ego grow too big now, okay? Okay. Is there an I in Travis Kelce?
Yeah.
There probably is.
There should be.
Yeah.
All right, really quickly, though, thank you so much. It was a ton of fun being able to hang out. It makes it so easy when you work with people that you love to work with every single day. So
you guys are getting all sappy on me.
By the way, am I back on Sunday or no? Have we confirmed this?
Yes, you're officially back.
Did Jimmy Pitaro email you again?
Yeah, he did. And he was
I know
like,
he
thanks for
started
doing
with
your
the
homework.
Wally
The Wally Pip email.
link.
It's weird.
Yeah.
It's, I still haven't quite figured out what that meant. He did also send me, he sent me like locations, like to consider other work. He was like, have you checked out real estate and like different offices?
Would be good for you.
It's like, yeah, Charlotte would be a nice match for you, right? Like you can go work on the ACC network. Maybe you could be the Panthers head coach. Like
that's right.
You decide, choose your own adventure, but like, I think you're good.
I love it.
Daniel, good job, bud.
I appreciate you guys. It's been a ton of fun. Let's jump right into the injuries, though. Not to make that really exciting. Sorry, I didn't mean to make that so exciting. I don't know what I was
from
doing.
here to here.
I feel lousy now.
Sorry, that was real tough. But Stephania, we got a bunch of stuff to be able to get through to set people up for their Week 6 waivers. Let's start in Seattle, where unfortunately we saw Rashad Penny go down. On Monday's show, we read the tweet from Brady Henderson. But where are we at with the latest on Rashad Penny?
Well, Pete Carroll appeared on the Seattle Sports Show on 710 Radio and really confirmed what we already were thinking, that Rashad Penny's season is indeed over. Referred to the injury as a fractured fibula and also injured his tibia, and that he's going to need surgery. He called it a heartbreaking loss for him. And I think if you saw some of what was reported about how Rashad Penny had really, the injuries in his career had been weighing on him, and he was so excited about being healthy and coming out strong and starting this season, being there, available and consistent for the Seahawks. And I read that, it really made me sad. You guys know that I sometimes talk about how, even though I report on injuries, and I'm a physical therapist, you want to see people do well. You know injuries are going to happen. You want to see them come back. And when people overcome big injuries, like Rashad Penny has done several times, you're pulling for them. And this is a really sad one because of the severity of the injury. And you know what happens when guys miss this much time? People start talking about it as a factor for them going forward. So I think right now we all just wish the best for Rashad Penny. Ken Walker III is going to be probably assuming the bulk of the workload here going forward. And we shall see how it plays out.
Yeah, and Ken Walker looked fantastic. Field, I don't know if you want to add anything because we did not have you for the Monday show, but he looked great. I'm sure someone we're going to talk about within the Waiver Wire segment with Eric Moody.
I will not steal Moody's thunder on Ken Walker III. I will just say this. Stephania, I think, said it perfectly. That being so, every injury sucks. I hate to see an ankle sprain, a hangnail to something way more significant. That being said, when a guy has been through it so frequently, like Rashad Penny has, and come back literally stronger each time, that just seems to hit a little bit different. So Rashad Penny, we wish you well. You are set to be a free agent this offseason. Let's hope you get a bag somewhere. I know it's going to be a hard thing to do coming off of an injury at the running back position, but you ran really well again prior to this injury. The job is now yours, Kenneth Walker III, and there are some big shoes to fill. Eric Moody will fill us in on how capable he is to fill those shoes.
By the way, Rashad Penny had cracked the 6th fastest time as a ball carrier this season.
Yeah, he's a beast.
21.44 miles per hour. So proof already that he has come back from injury and can still be this amazing, fast, talented player. I hope he gets to continue doing that.
All right, Stephania, let's move ahead to the Bengals, where T. Higgins played only 7 snaps.
Yeah, that was a bummer. Remember how we were talking on Sunday about whether he would be active or not? He was declared active, and this happens sometimes, right? Players go out, they're coming off an injury. He'd been limited in practice the entire week before and went out, and the ankle just wasn't right. Zach Taylor talked about it afterwards. He said that he tried to fight through it, that he wasn't okay to go after halftime, even though he wanted to come back in. He just couldn't play through it, called him a tough guy, and now considered day-to-day with the ankle injury going forward. But occasionally this happens. We think that somebody's going to try and play, and we've seen players go out with ankle injuries and have amazing games, and we've seen them go out in case of T. Higgins, just could not continue. I do think one interesting follow from this is that Tyler Boyd got a lot of good work, and Zach Taylor and Brian Callahan, their offensive coordinator, both said that Boyd should be getting a higher target share. So I think we're going to potentially see that this week.
Shout out the guy in one of my leagues who started Teddy Bridgewater and T. Higgins and Darren Waller this week.
Oof.
Oh, wait, that was me. Shout out me.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's tough.
Yeah.
Yikes.
I like sort of regret that. I mean, what are you going to do, right? I mean, all three of these guys are active, all three, and we'll talk about Darren Waller more in a minute, but like they're on the field for like a combined like 12 plays. That's fantasy football in a nutshell right there for you.
That's really tough. I said he was on the field for 7 snaps. He ran 7 routes. Apologies for that.
He was on the field for 10.
How dare you, Daniel? He
was on the
barely
field.
played.
He was on the field for 10 snaps,
Okay.
16%.
Yeah, you shorted them those 3 snaps. He had an awesome effort on that run blocking.
Yeah. All right, let's talk Jahan Dotson, Stephania, as we're not really sure when we're going to be able to have him back in our fantasy lineups.
No, it's interesting. When he was talking to reporters, he said this is first time he's ever injured his hamstring as a wide receiver. That's kind of surprising. Also, the first time not playing in a game since junior year of high school. And he said it was a weird feeling not being out there. He's obviously in the recovery mode now, says he really doesn't have any idea. And part of that is not having any experience with this kind of injury before, which he acknowledged. So I do expect that it's going to take some time. They have a short week this week. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Dotson is out now, and we'll just see how it is going forward.
Field, did you see what the Jahan Dotson role did in this offense last week?
Yeah, Diami Brown had 2 catches for 2 touchdowns, which means he's a must start, right? No,
Stop
cool
it.
story. And, I'm happy for Diami Brown. By the way, he's a talented player, right? Like, they just have a lot of good wide receivers in the room. They just need other parts of the offense to be good.
Yeah.
By Diami Brown, like, he applies if you were looking in DFS. That's as far as I'll go with Diami Brown for week 6, assuming that Jahan Dotson does not play, which, as Stephania just said, seems unlikely at this point.
Yep.
Who's ready for Commanders Bears on Thursday night?
Ooh, that's going to be a
After
game.
last night, too?
Yeah,
Wow.
that's going to be a little bit of a letdown. All right.
Gotta find me some props.
That's right.
That's,
All right.
That's how I'm going to entertain myself.
We got one more we're going to talk about before we jump into the game, Stephania, and that is Baker Mayfield likely going to miss this next week. Is that correct?
I mean, sounds like it. Like a presumed left high ankle sprain. He was looking into getting multiple opinions. They're kind of busy over there at the Panthers, so we're not really sure how everything's going to shake out. But he was in a walking boot after the game, clearly hobbled by the ankle injury once it happened. Sam Darnold not quite ready to come back from his injury yet. So a lot of things up in the air over there in Carolina.
I'll say. Yeah, I mean, here's the reality. This offense, other than Christian McCaffrey, has been unusable in fantasy so far. So whether it's Baker Mayfield, whether it's PJ Walker, whether it's... I don't even know who else could be signed.
Right.
I don't know. Like if Cam Newton gets signed tomorrow, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter right now. It's such a dysfunctional situation on offense right now. I think Sam Darnold will eventually be back, and I wouldn't be surprised based off how Baker Mayfield's been playing if Darnold gets a crack to start, but it doesn't matter right now. You're playing one guy on that offense.
Yep.
Christian McCaffrey, and that's it. God, is it difficult times right now for the Carolina Panthers.
You're starting one guy Field, but you're not dropping DJ Moore. Like you're basically just.
I don't think so,
Daniel.
Daniel.
He's a bench guy for the rest.
And I was, Keith and I were going back and forth on text last night. This feels like, and sometimes you get caught in the moment. This feels like the weirdest fantasy season ever, right? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm being a prisoner of the moment. It just sort of feels that way. And along those lines, Daniel, I kind of wonder if maybe, just maybe, the number of wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks even that have been so up and down is way up this year compared to last year that you're like, yeah, you can drop DJ Moore, but think about like the 25 wide receivers right now. Like, do you drop Terry McLaurin? Do you drop Deontay Johnson? Right? Do you drop DJ Moore? Like, what do you do with these guys? There's like so many wide receivers that in flashes can be good, but in flashes can also be borderline zeros for your fantasy line.
Yeah, it's really tough.
Moore's close, but I'd hold. Too talented of a guy.
Agreed. I'm with you. All right, let's talk Monday Night Football recap. This was a fantastic game, Stephania. I do want to start with Darren Waller, who left this game early. What's the latest that we have on Darren Waller?
Well, it's a hamstring injury, Daniel, and you don't love to see that on top. Look, it's been a tough season for Darren Waller and for his fantasy managers to begin with, but he was out early in the first half, left without a catch. Obviously, we'll wait to see what happens with him going forward, but hamstring injuries are all over the map. I go back to Keenan Allen and Chargers, hasn't played since week 1 because of one. And then there are some people like Juju Smith-Schuster who's listed with hamstring tightness that crops up on a Saturday and plays on Monday night.
Yeah.
So all over the map.
Yeah, I mean, this is so unfortunate. For anybody that played Darren Waller, like, first of all, it's Darren Waller. Like, if you have him in your lineup and you expect him to play, you're starting him, right? And I know he hasn't been great this year. He's been far from it. But still, he's one of the 5 most talented tight ends in the NFL. You get a 0. And maybe you benefit from it. Maybe you were hurt by it. As I mentioned, I had the 0. I also was in a matchup where I was very, very, very tight going into Monday Night Football with my opponent only having Darren Waller. This is the way the fantasy football works. But with the Raiders going into their bye, hopefully on the other side of it, we'll have Darren Waller back. I will say, though, and this is not injury related, but after the game, we're going to dive into Davante Adams in just a second. After the game, Davante Adams, as he's walking off the field for the Raiders, frustrated, pushes a camera guy or a sound operator. There was someone who's on the staff on the field. He pushes him, and it was one of those moments where clearly Davante Adams wish he had it back. He has already taken to Twitter to say he regrets his actions, but it's possible that in week 7, when the Raiders return from their bye, no Davante Adams, no Darren Waller. It could be the Hunter Renfrow and Mac Hollins show.
Ooh. Do you know that Darren Waller is tight end 14 on the season in fantasy points?
And that's
yikes.
Great. But hold on, Stephania. You know what's crazy is that sounds bad, and then you're like, wait, he's been bad and he's still tight end 14?
Still tight end 14.
Right.
Yeah.
Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews,
I have a
the rest
little
of you don't
tight
matter.
end rant coming later in
so
the show.
I want to. Davante Adams was great on the field. He had 2 touchdowns, but I don't feel like when I was watching the Raiders, the guy that I was enamored by was Josh Jacobs for his 2nd consecutive week.
Oh, my goodness.
He was unreal. Second consecutive week with 30 or more fantasy points. And here's part of it. First 2 weeks of the season, he only had 1 catch. Each of the last 3 games, he's had at least 5 catches. Adding that to his passing game, adding that to his arsenal, has made Josh Jacobs look so good. He was running so hard.
It's his running.
I don't know what to say about it because you're starting him every week, but man, he just looks good.
Yeah, it's just the eye test. Like, he is running through people. He's running over people. He's getting around people. The way he's running is very Nick Chubb-like. It's unbelievable. And I think that we haven't seen that consistently from him, and no fault of his own, but Josh Jacobs has been banged up a little bit. We used to talk about his style of play potentially leading to that, the shoulder injuries, the rib injuries, and so forth. But he looks fantastic right now.
Well, Field, we came into the season, too, talking about like how much of this is going to be like a Patriots-esque running back room where they're just going to split up so many carries. Yeah, and it hasn't turned out that way.
Absolutely none of it, Daniel. It's remarkable. Josh McDaniels has said, you, me, Josh, we are simpatico because of our first names, and you are going to be the guy. He's been one of the best values in fantasy football right now. He's a lock-it-in, top 10 running back. Obviously not in week 6 because they're on a bye. He's been tremendous, and put away the snaps, the targets, the opportunities. Just watch him play. He looks remarkable right now. There are a few running backs that just look like they're playing a different game at the moment. He is one of them. So happy for Josh Jacobs, and I'm not trying to get so far ahead of myself, but when free agency rolls around in March, we've got 2 guys in Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs who are scheduled to be free agents. They play a position where we have not seen guys get paid big recently. Chase Edmonds was the highest paid running back last offseason in terms of players that changed teams.
Was that 2 years, $12 million?
I think it was, 2 years, 12 some million bucks.
Yeah.
Imagine Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs and what kind of contract they will be looking to fetch with the way that they're playing right now.
I always feel like you can make me want to get on my soapbox about running backs. These guys deserve to get paid. They are the most vulnerable position.
Yeah.
When they carry a team on their back like Saquon Barkley is doing right now, I know there's an injury history there, but that talent is so rare, and rarely do they get compensated for what they've already done. You know, we see it in wide receivers all the time. Running backs get a big payday, and people blame them the next year if they're not carrying their load. It's like they have to prove themselves into the next contract. The average running back career is less than 5 years. Most of these guys don't get paid till they're 5 years out. So Christian McCaffrey gets paid, all of a sudden has a tough time with injuries. People complain. I'm never going to complain. Saquon, get your money. Josh Jacobs, get your money. I love to see it.
Real quick look at the rest of this Raiders offense.
Yep.
Devontae Adams, 3 catches on 7 targets for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. And listen,
Absurd.
I'm not. I do want to ask this question. I'm not going to complain about it because it was still a ton of fantasy points, but he's had less than 5 catches in 3 of his last 4 games. Field Yates. That's very not Devontae Adams like. He's getting his points, but is there reason to be a little bit concerned within this offense? And it's tough. Like, how do you say concerned with how weird this fantasy year has been? Like we've talked about.
Mike Clay on my shoulder is saying, "Hey, touchdowns are hard to predict." Except for when you're Devontae Adams. Like, he just finds the end zone, right? He is so good. He is the best touchdown creating wide receiver. Maybe Mike Evans is in the conversation, maybe Cooper Kupp, but it's a very short list.
Yeah.
That's the Mike Clay side. Other side of me is like, he just rules. So I'm fine with Devontae Adams. Like, maybe if we were to redraft right now, you'd have a more compelling case, obviously, for Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson, and I suppose Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs, maybe Jamar Chase, but like, he's still in that elite, lock-it-in wide receiver 1. And it wouldn't surprise me, Daniel, if the next time they play and he's available, because we'll see for week 7, if he has like 14 catches. Like, I don't know that my feelings have changed much on Devontae Adams. Just when you watch him, goodness gracious. I mean, those touchdown catches he had last night, both of them were absurd.
Still great.
I gotta hand it to Derek Carr, though. That was a dime.
Yeah.
Like, that was like the most perfectly placed ball in
Well,
that one touchdown.
the last one was. The first one was like, oh my God, he's so wide open. And Troy Aikman talked about this. He was like, those are often the hardest throws to make. The player is so open that you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna screw this up.
Yep.
And and Devontae Adams had to kind of wait for the ball. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
He still scored a touchdown, but it was
That's
one of those where it's like, I know, I mean, we all know that feeling, right? Like, it's free throws can either be easy or impossible, right?
I do not know the football feeling that you're talking about, Field, but yes, like a fast break where you miss a layup where you're all on your own. It's like totally. That one I definitely understand.
Everybody's watching.
Yeah.
Anything else real quickly with the Raiders before we move on to the Chiefs so we can keep this show moving?
Another quiet day for Hunter Renfrow. Better days are ahead.
Yeah, first game back after the concussions. Mac Hollins, though, they threw it his way, but those passes weren't necessarily pretty and
not the same.
Yeah, it's not the same. He has great hair though, still. Just saying.
With the Kansas City Chiefs, I needed Travis Kelce to have more passing or receiving yards than Devontae Adams last night. I did not get that, but he did have an unreal fantasy night. 7 catches on 8 targets for a whopping 25 yards and 4 touchdowns. This stat line feels like everything that's a mistake. Like, there's nothing about this that's right.
I thought that they were showing a highlight of a previous touchdown, and it was just him scoring another touchdown. It was so stupid. How many times? I mean,
it was absurd.
Absurd.
It was so. I don't. Let's. There's not a lot of takeaways from the Chiefs' offense last night. Well, we'll dive into a couple after this, but just like on Mahomes and Kelce, Mahomes absurd. Travis Kelce. This is a Monday Night Miracle right here, right? Yes. Because all the games that were just predicated upon something positive or negative happening for Travis Kelce last night actually came to fruition. Travis Kelce had 4 touchdowns last night. He had 25 receiving yards. I saw this note from ESPN Stats and Information. The fewest yards in a game in which a player had at least 4 receiving touchdowns prior to last night was 93 by Marvin Harrison. Wow. He had 25 yards and 4 touchdowns. Like, it's absurd, and it's an amazing performance. Thank you, Travis Kelce. This is why, and Mike and I we text about this we had the big board bet in the preseason about Travis Kelce versus Mark Andrews for tight end 1 for the season. And we whenever one of them does something really, really good, we're like, dumbest board bet of all time. Because here's the reality. The two of them are playing a different sport.
Else.
Yes.
By the way, Travis Kelce has 111.8 fantasy points on the season through 5 weeks. Ridiculous. Mark Andrews is second with 91.2.
Okay, so it's,
I'm
waxing Mike Clay is what we're saying.
They're in the 60s after that for total points for tight ends. So it's those two and nobody else.
They're really great. Can we really quickly, I want to talk about the rest of the pass catchers. MVS looked really nice.
Are there any?
I've been pretty underwhelmed by Juju Smith-Schuster.
Totally, Daniel.
I realize he's been getting the targets and the opportunities, but he is not capitalizing on them.
So Patrick Mahomes was right and wrong in the preseason. He was right in the sense that it's not going to be the same wide receiver every single week. He was wrong because I think the implication of what he was saying was that it's going to be somebody each week. We just don't know who that somebody is going to be. It's going to be somebody in some weeks, other weeks not, and we don't know who it's going to be. You're right, though, because Juju's had one good week. MVS has had one good week. Mecole Hardman, no. Sky Moore, no. Mostly it's Travis Kelce and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who, by the way, came back down to earth last night.
A little bit.
6.5 fantasy points. I know he nearly scored on the play that was initially ruled touchdown, but clearly not a touchdown. But this is why everybody who was urging you to potentially sell high on Clyde Edwards-Helaire was saying so. The touchdowns were not going to keep up. It just was a matter of time. And I don't know why they didn't do it. Maybe because they were too busy throwing to Travis Kelce. But one of these days, the Chiefs are going to throw a touchdown to a good defensive player, like from the goal line, right? Like, that's how this Chiefs offense is going to go this year. As far as wide receivers are concerned, I'm a little bit more excited about MVS than I was going into last night. But my big takeaway for right now is that if you're going to play a Chiefs wide receiver, you're going to be closing your eyes. You're going to be throwing a dart, hoping you hit a bullseye. Now, it's a larger bullseye than normal because Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes, but you're going to have to get lucky if you pay off.
Well, Mecole Hardman is still hurt. I mean, that showed up last night, too. You know, he's had this heel issue that you've seen him come on and off the field. And last night he did again. He made a catch. He probably could have gotten a few more yards on it. He came out and immediately was hobbled and was being looked at. So I don't think he's quite right yet. And until I see him looking healthier, I'd be concerned just about what he's going to be able to deliver.
Well, from that standpoint, anything else for the Chiefs game to be able to talk about before we move on?
I have a last. This is a fun stat. Kyle helped me out with this morning.
Bring it.
This is crazy. So Patrick Mahomes became the starter in 2018.
That was a good choice by them.
Yeah, it was pretty good. With Patrick Mahomes as their starting quarterback, remember he's missed a few games due to injury. The Chiefs are now 12-9. It's a 57% winning percentage when they have a game in which they trail by at least 10 points. During that same period of time, every other team, including the Chiefs with Matt Moore as their starting quarterback, is 156 and 873, a 15% winning percentage when trailing by at least 10 points.
What?
So no lead is safe against Patrick Mahomes. It's like no lead is safe when you're facing Travis Kelce in fantasy.
12-9, Field Yates. So you're saying when they are down by 10 points in a game,
they're still more likely
they
than
have
not
a
to
winning record. Oh
Correct.
My gosh. How good is Patrick Mahomes in a league where like you have to have the quarterback, right? That just highlights how good Patrick Mahomes
Ridiculous.
is. It's unreal. All right. Let's pay some bills really quick. We'll come back and talk about a few things that we've looked at through the first couple of weeks in the season. But Stephania. Oh, sorry. I thought when I said pay some bills, that was my bad.
Yeah, no, well, you know, I'm right here.
I know you are.
I'm right here for you,
job.
Daniel.
Great job.
I love how you gave me the clue.
Yeah.
And you know what? Geico asks, how would you love a chance to save some money on insurance? Of course you would. And when it comes to great rates on insurance, Geico can help, like with insurance for your car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and RV. Even help with homeowners or renters coverage. Plus, add an easy-to-use mobile app, available 24-hour roadside assistance, and more. And Geico is an easy choice. Switch today, see all the ways you could save. It's easy. Simply go to geico.com or contact your local agent today.
Did you know that there are currently over 2.4 million podcasts in the world, including the one that you're listening to right now?
Or watching.
Maybe the best one. And it takes a team of people to help bring these podcasts together, from the production team to the graphics team to the makeup team. It really does take an army of people to do this thing right. And needless to say, hiring the right people for those roles is really, really important. And whether you're hiring for a podcast or for your growing business, there's only one place that makes it easy: ZipRecruiter. And now you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/FFF. ZipRecruiter uses powerful technology to find and match the right candidates up with your job. You can easily review these candidates and invite your top choices to apply. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. So if you're a fan of this podcast and you want to try ZipRecruiter for free today, you need to remember our special URL, ZipRecruiter.com/FFF. Once again, ZipRecruiter.com/FFF. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. All right. We're coming back out, talking Hear Me Out. We are now 5 weeks through the NFL season. That means that we have had 80 NFL games to be able to react to, and we're just going to talk about a handful of things. We each picked 2 things that we have noticed over the first 5 weeks of this season. Field Yates, I'm going to start with you. What's one of your topics for this week?
Here's what I'm keeping an eye on. This is the final week in which Hollywood Brown is all by himself amongst fantasy relevant wide receivers for the Arizona Cardinals. And I guess Rondell Moore is semi-fantasy relevant. He's like a bench stash for right now. But how good has Hollywood Brown been? I'll tell you, he's wide receiver 5 in points so far this season. He's been incredible. He's a lineup block. He's a star, better than he ever was in Baltimore. He has been unbelievable. But next week, DeAndre Hopkins returns. What does that mean for Hollywood Brown? You know, a big part of me thinks like, hey, he's been so good, it's just not going to matter. Like maybe his value depreciates a little bit, and sort of DeAndre Hopkins just vacates the lack of production they've been getting from other players, whether it's AJ Green, whether it's just anybody else in that wide receiver room. That's my guess, is that it goes down a little bit. Not a whole lot, though. But as we're looking at values, talking about Josh Jacobs earlier on, Hollywood Brown, one of the best values amongst all wide receivers so far this season. There have been a lot of guys who have been really good. Christian Kirk's an example, is a good value play. Amon-Ra St. Brown, prior to his injury, was awesome as a value play. But it feels like now, 5 weeks in, because of the fact that he has played all 5 games and performed in basically all 5 games, Hollywood Brown has been, if not the best value, one of the best values amongst all players in fantasy football. He has double-digit targets in 4 straight games. Maybe that number does not continue with DeAndre Hopkins eventually returning. Again, that's in week 7. But man, he has been so good. I don't know how Arizona, who's not doing a ton of stuff really right now, doesn't continue to involve Marquise Hollywood Brown somewhere close to how they have been so far.
Hollywood Brown leads the NFL in routes run through the first 5 weeks of the NFL ahead of, well, basically everyone, including Cooper Kupp. So they're definitely utilizing it, Field. All right, Stephania, 5 weeks in, give us your first takeaway.
All right, so my question is about the Vikings backfield, because is this going to be a split situation the rest of the season, and how confident can you be in either running back? In other words, does it matter whether you have Dalvin Cook or Alexander Mattison are both going to be able to deliver for you? We had concerns after Dalvin Cook went out with a shoulder injury. We didn't know how he was going to play the first week back. I kind of was inclined to think that he would be okay, because this is not his first time dealing with the shoulder subluxation, wearing a harness. It really hadn't hampered him when he's had these episodes before, and he came back strong right out of the gate. It is interesting, though, if you look at Dalvin Cook's snap percentage, it has gone down steadily since week 1. 77% in week 1, then 67.8%, 62.7%, 67%, and then this week, 56.8%, his lowest snap percentage. And yet, 2 touchdowns, one from the 1-yard line, one from the 5-yard line, still over 90 yards in rushing. So it doesn't matter, because he's still really valuable when he's on the field. Alexander Mattison is trending upward. He had up over 43% of the snap share last week. That's my question. Can both of them be viable running backs at a time where it's hard to find viable running backs who can both run the ball and catch the ball?
I'm glad you didn't poo-poo Dalvin Cook too much, Stephania, because prior to last week, there had been some negative energy surrounding Dalvin Cook. Like, he had 1 touchdown in the first 4 weeks. Better days were going to be ahead. But I just think
I thought he was good the whole time. I didn't.
There were some frustrating moments when he had minimal receiving yards in games and no touchdowns in games. But I think what this reminds me is that they're just doing, fantasy football aside, like they're doing a really good job of getting both of these guys involved, taking a little bit off the plate of Dalvin Cook, not too much, but a little bit to allow Alexander Mattison, who's a really good player, by the way, to do his thing. And Dalvin Cook, still in a year when running backs have been so disappointing, the guy has been pretty rock solid if you look at the total of 5 weeks so far.
Alexander Mattison had 12 touches this last week, only rostered in 42% of leagues, knowing that he's just getting a few more looks. And with the injury stuff to Dalvin Cook, I feel like he should be rostered in quite a few more than 42% of leagues. Maybe Eric Moody. A little bit of a teaser. We'll talk about that a little bit later. All right. Here's what I want to talk about, and I'd love to have you guys weigh in here. Yeah. I need to apologize to everybody that listened to me on this podcast when I was like, hey, wait on quarterback. Just wait. Yeah. There's so many good ones late in the draft. You know what there weren't? Good quarterbacks late in the draft. They were all early in the draft.
Yeah.
You want to look at, here we go, real quick. Let's just look at the top 6 quarterbacks during draft season. Josh Allen, quarterback 1 on the year. Patrick Mahomes, quarterback 4 on the year. Justin Herbert, quarterback 8 on the year. Lamar Jackson, quarterback 2. Kyler Murray, quarterback 5. Jalen Hurts, quarterback 3. So really, Justin Herbert's the only one outside of the top 6 that has not delivered. And all the quarterbacks that we said to wait on.
Yeah.
Russell Wilson, quarterback 14.
Yeah,
Derek Carr, quarterback 15. Trevor Lawrence, quarterback 16. Aaron Rodgers, quarterback 18. Matthew Stafford, quarterback 26. And that doesn't include, and it's not their fault, either Dak Prescott or Trey Lance, both of whom got hurt and left you having to find someone else off the waiver wire. If you waited on quarterback, you are likely in a hole at the QB position trying to fill in with a streamer. And everybody else that did everything that was opposite of what we felt like was the right thing in using an early round pick on a quarterback is likely in a great spot. And I'm sorry.
Okay, so Daniel, I used to do this to Matthew all the time, and I'm going to do to you right now, is that like when you put the egg on your own face for a mistake that all of us made, come on, you don't have to do that to yourself, all right? You deserve better.
But it's thanks, Stephania.
You do,
appreciate
because
it.
I waited and took Russell Wilson.
Okay,
I blame you.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, that was for Stephania then. All right.
If Stephania were not here, I would tell you that you don't have to blame yourself, Daniel, because this is an industry-wide recommendation, right? As waiting on quarterbacks is often the way to go because of all the values that you can find. The problem is that there have been some late round values. It's just not the players that most of us were discussing.
Right.
The 3 values amongst quarterbacks so far this year, late round or undrafted players, have been, as we all discussed, from March to August, Geno Smith, Carson Wentz, and Jared Goff, who maybe got a combined 3 mentions during our show in the preseason.
Yep.
1 when we did the Commanders double trouble, 2 when we did the Seahawks double trouble, 3 when we did the Lions double trouble.
Do you remember how long it took the Seahawks to name Geno Smith the starter? We couldn't even talk about it because it was going to be Drew Lock or Geno Smith. We didn't know who was going to be. We were worried about DK Metcalf. That was the only person we were talking about.
I could not be happier for Geno Smith. He is
32 years old, right?
He's playing awesome.
It's fantastic.
He is playing
Great
awesome.
Story.
It's really fun to see. But Dan, you are so right. And I remember during the preseason, here's blaming. Everybody can take their blame. They already threw against Daniel and just throw it against me instead, because I felt like the value play was in that middle tier, right? The idea that it could be Russell Wilson or Tom Brady or Joe Burrow or Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford. Brady is definitely trending in the right direction, and Burrow's been a little better of late for sure. But
those other guys.
What do you do right? How many fantasy points do you think Aaron Rodgers has topped out at in 5 games so far this year? Just guess.
Through 5 games or per game?
Like the highest he's scored in a game so far this year.
The highest he's scored in a game, 22.
24.
Okay, yeah, you wish. 16.88.
Wow.
16.88 for Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
That's absurd. He has 4 games between 16 and 16.88 points. If you're looking for a very average quarterback, your guy's Aaron Rodgers in fantasy right now.
Oh, it's so frustrating.
But he doesn't want negative talk in the locker room. He said it needs to be manifested through positive words. I heard that.
I'm okay with that.
So,
all right.
if you guys would just be more positive,
just say nice things.
Maybe he could generate some more fantasy points.
Field, who you got for your next
player? Do I do that right now or no?
No, you don't have to do that right now.
Okay, so here's an interesting one. So do we have a changing of the guard in Jacksonville? Because in weeks 1 through 3, James Robinson had 56.3 fantasy points and 57 touches to Travis Etienne's 27.3 fantasy points and 34 touches. In weeks 4 through 5, James Robinson has a total of 8.8 fantasy points on 20 touches. Travis Etienne has 17.6 fantasy points on 21 touches, and Etienne has played 12 more snaps over the past 2 weeks. I don't think so. As a matter of fact, I think what we have is a potential RB trap zone where you can't really play either one of these guys. Robinson kept scoring touchdowns in those first few weeks, which certainly was great. It was an amazing thing to see. I couldn't have been happier for him. He was the only running back to score a touchdown on the ground in week 1, week 2, and week 3. At some point, the clock was going to strike midnight. It happened in week 4, and I fear that now bye weeks will certainly impact this a little bit, that this is going to be a situation where these guys top out in terms of our rankings weekly as like RB24, RB26 maybe, because if they're splitting duties, Etienne's not getting elite passing game utilization. Same with James Robinson. If they're not finding the end zone, it's going to be hard for them to pay off. And it's frustrating because I think we all recognize they're both talented guys. Etienne has a chance to be, I think, really special as a player, especially in the open field. But it's starting to make me feel like there are a few backfields that are just trap zones right now where it's hard to play anybody from that backfield. Washington's one of them. Jacksonville feels like one of them. There are a few others in that same category. But Jacksonville, which looks so promising for James Robinson in weeks 1 through 3, all of a sudden has crashed way back down to earth.
I see that very similar to you, Field. I'm going to talk about James Robinson and Travis Etienne and Squirrel Stock.
Did I just ruin Squirrel Stock?
No, you did not ruin it at all.
Okay.
I'm gonna weigh in on a handful of things because I agree with you on some of that. Stephania, looks like you took a softball question here.
What?
Oh no, sorry, it was the opposite of that. I thought you were talking about how good Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews were. No big deal. But instead, you're talking about how bad everyone not named Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews were.
Yeah, I take back all those compliments on you being a host by saying I took a softball. Come on.
Wow.
Though I already alluded to this at the top of the show that we've talked about a tight end wasteland, which I can't say that without thinking of the Who, and I feel like it's got to go to that music, right? Tight end wasteland. It's got to be my theme song after Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews have put the rest of the tight end department to shame. We talked about this at the beginning. Total points for Travis Kelce so far in the season, 111.8. Total points for Mark Andrews, 91.2. When you get to the next tier, you have to go 25 and a half fantasy points to get to tight end 3, which is TJ Hawkinson. Do you know the next 4 tight ends below Kelce and Andrews are just over 60 total fantasy points? That is huge. So Hawkinson, Zach Ertz, who actually has been pretty consistent hanging out there, Dallas Goedert, Tyler Higbee. We've talked about him on Fantasy Football Now. Somebody you should pick up. He's one of the only people Matthew Stafford is throwing to. Mm-hmm. And then the next player at 58.8 fantasy points, which tight end do you think that is? Give me a guess.
I'm going to
Taysom Hill?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
It's Taysom Hill. It's Taysom Hill who, again, love you, TMR. I made the call just 3 weeks too early.
Yeah.
And not too far behind him, though. And these are the ones I want to talk about. David Njoku.
Okay. Been really good.
56.3. And Gerald Everett at 50.3. And so my question is, who should we be focused on now? I kind of like the David Njoku because of the upward trend. If you look at the last three games, 2 out of 3 games, he's finished in the top 10 of fantasy tight ends. So
totally agree,
I think
Stephania.
he's the one I'd be looking at. But honestly, what are you going to do with this position because it's such a disaster?
Well, a few thoughts here. By the way, just a note, Travis Kelce does have the decisive edge in fantasy points over Mark Andrews. He has 1 more catch and 2 fewer receiving yards. It's touchdowns, right? So it's the touchdowns that are a difference here.
Right.
Second thought, David Njoku, 100% buying in on him and over Gerald Everett for a very straightforward reason. It's Amari Cooper and David Njoku right now in the Browns passing game. Gerald Everett's going to eventually have Keenan Allen playing alongside him in Los Angeles, perhaps as soon as this week. We'll see. But still, at some point, right? That's going to take away from his target share. So I think it's David Njoku. And we had this conversation in the preseason, and I will not forget it. We put it out there to the public, and I posted the video, as I often do, the videos from this show, and I talked about how, let's talk about taking a tight end in the first round. And I had a lot of people took them noses, stuck them right up in the air, and said, I want to play your league if you're taking a tight end in the first round. Folks, it's not that crazy. Not only are these 2 guys elite players, that their production at the end of the season is going to be like shouting distance of these other top players at running back and wide receiver, but the decisive edge that you have when you're Stephania and you've got Mark Andrews and I'm Field and I've got Tyler Conklin as my starting tight end this week and he had 0 points last week, it's massive, Daniel. So we need to reconfigure whether taking a tight end, if it's Mark Andrews or Travis Kelce, is a good or bad idea going forward.
Not only that, but I feel like Stephania, if she took a tight end early, probably also took Josh Allen in the third. So you're really in a hole. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like she stopped out of both positions.
I did not pay, as I alluded to, I did not pay attention to the early quarterback drafting. I went with Russell Wilson way too many times. I did, however, take Mark Andrews in a number of leagues because this one you could kind of see coming. Come on. Volume, I think, I understand the argument for Mark Andrews is volume. That's Lamar Jackson. He's good. Travis Kelce didn't have as much volume to start the season, but he gets the red zone looks. And in fact, if you happen to be watching SVP last night, Ryan Clark did this amazing breakdown where he showed how every single other pass catcher is assigned to block for Travis Kelce because everybody knows in the red zone, he's their best chance at a touchdown. So that's not changing. I got news for you. Travis Kelce is he's gonna have another game with 4 touchdowns. Mark my words.
Oh wow, I'm gonna have another one.
All right. If that happens, call the century by Stephania.
Yes, seriously. All right. I got one more before we move on to Squirrel Stock, and it is please change something in Atlanta. Please give me a new quarterback change. Please change your offensive philosophy. Please do anything different than what it is that you're currently doing. And I'm going to start with the positives, okay? Drake London is 3rd in the NFL in target share, which is awesome. Right field, when you're talking about plus 35% target share, can you argue with that number?
Until last week, you couldn't.
Okay, so 35% is elite. That is unreal. But the problem is he's wide receiver 34 on a per game basis, and it's because he's only run 106 routes, which is wide receiver 66 on the year. This feels like A.J. Brown all over again, where you have this guy you used a top 12 pick on, top 10 pick on.
8.
And you're putting him out there, and that this target share is deceiving. When you talk about 36% target share, that's huge. That's massive for this team. But the only way for him to catch passes is to be out there on the field. And if he's not out there on the field running routes, then he can't catch passes. And guess what? It's the same thing for Kyle Pitts.
Yeah.
Tight end 7 in target share, tight end 21 in routes run per game. You used 2 early draft picks on these young unicorn superstars, and you're running the football. I have no idea what you're doing, not only from a regular football perspective, but you're ruining these 2 players for us from fantasy. I don't understand it. Put the ball in their hands and give them opportunities to be the players that you drafted them to be. My gosh, it's so frustrating.
It is super frustrating. I figured it out though. I think I've cracked the code. And
Tell me.
I'm being serious here. The Falcons have enough talent and enough coaching to be frisky more often than not.
Ugh, I don't like it.
And what they try to do, in effect, is turn the game into like a mud runner, right? Not a 100-meter sprint. They try to slow that game down to a molasses pace and win around the narrowest or by the narrowest of margins. And last week, I hear everything Daniel just said, but a Bucs team that has blown them out since Tom Brady's arrival in Tampa Bay really should have been punting to Atlanta with 2 minutes and 30 seconds to go for Atlanta to potentially have the ball and win the game. So what I would say is that while it stinks for fantasy to high heavens, I kind of get it. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with it because I would love to see them air it out and throw the ball 50 times a game. But I would love to see Desmond Ridder sooner than later, Daniel. And I think if some of these close games continue to be losses, then I think it does happen.
By the way, they had to come back in that game against Tampa Bay. Yeah. So they showed they can do it. Yep. Like, to me, that might be the thing that opens the door, right? Yeah. Because they had to score in a hurry, and they did it. So why not try that from the beginning of the game and not make it be a question mark at the end?
One of the things that's really fun to me is when you decide you're going to lean on a 31-year-old running back who's had one good season, or like a 4th or 5th round running back you just drafted over the 2 first-round superstars that you've drafted in the last 2 years. But I don't run a fantasy football, or I just run a fantasy football team, not a real football team. All right, let's talk Squirrel Stock really quickly before we welcome in our good friend Eric Moody. And for me this week, I've got Squirrel Stock up on Brian Robinson Jr. and at the same time, Squirrel Stock down on Antonio Gibson.
Okay.
Antonio Gibson.
Okay. Yep.
Running back finishes on the season. And we read this on Friday's show. Week 1, running back 10. Week 2, running back 6. Week 3.
16.
Oh, sorry, 16. Sorry. Week 2, running back 16. Week 3, running back 27. Week 4, 34. Yep. And now here we are in week 5. He was running back 44.
I believe that's going the wrong direction.
Every single week he has finished worse. And now you bring in Brian Robinson, who in his first week back, led the team with 9 carries and rushing yards. He had more touches than Antonio Gibson in this game as well. I'm not saying it's going to be easy sledding, but Brian Robinson needs to be rostered in more leagues because this team wants to use him. And Antonio Gibson's fantasy stock is down because of the way that they obviously look at this rookie. Field, how you feel about these 2 running backs?
I agree with 75% of what you said.
Okay.
Antonio Gibson, of course, I agree. He's borderline unusable right now. He is unusable right now. Brian Robinson was one of the coolest stories I've seen in a long time.
Right.
He's courageous. He's tough. He's resilient. He's a lot of things that I wish I were, and I am not. Could not be more impressed with his return to the field. As far as fantasy value goes, though, Daniel, I'm a little bit nervous, though, because he had 0 targets. I don't figure him to be a big part of the passing game going forward. This offense is not very good right now, especially running the football with a weak interior offensive line. J.D. McKissick is going to be a big part of the passing game. So I think Brian Robinson just sort of falls into that trap zone that I referenced earlier, where if you start him, you're going to need a touchdown to pay off. And love the story. Love the fact that he's back on the field. Couldn't be more inspired by it. I just think for fantasy purposes, I think the stock is kind of neutral. Like, it's hard for him. I'm okay with rostering him. I just don't think right now, like, there's a massive opportunity because of the offense he plays.
Rostering him is stock up at this point because
That's
he hasn't
fair.
even
That's
been able
fair.
to play at all.
So but I agree with like 75% of your assessment.
Fair. All right, let's talk about the next one, and it's another stock down. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and in case you're wondering, it has not changed. Cam Akers and these Rams running backs, stock down. They get Carolina this week, then they have a bye, so you don't get to use them next week.
Or this week.
Well, or this week. You should not use them against Carolina this week. You should not use them against Carolina this week.
Or any week.
Well,
And then the 2 weeks after that, they've got San Francisco and Tampa Bay. This team is awful right now from a running back standpoint. Cam Akers has 1 game with more than 45 rushing yards. Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson, Ram running backs, just not use them at all. Stock down across the board, and that's not going to change anytime soon.
to your point, Daniel, Cam Akers last week, 13 carries, 33 yards. I'm no math major, but I'm thinking that's not very good.
That's not good.
Yeah,
And
I just confirmed it.
he did not catch the one target that was directed at him. Now, I will say, the Carolina Panthers just gave up 199 yards, scrimmage yards to Jeff Wilson Jr. and Tevin Coleman of my 49ers.
Sure.
But Cam Akers doesn't look like Jeff Wilson Jr.
No, he
does
does
right
not.
now.
He does not.
So it is a little bit of apples and oranges, although Carolina is such a mess. If you're desperate, if one of your team, we got buys this week, we got 4 teams on bye. If you're desperate, maybe is a deep flex, but I'm really, look, there's not that many great running backs, so I understand it. But after that, boy, does it get awful for them. And yeah. Stock down.
Not great.
Can't play.
All right. One more that we've got for Squirrely Player for you, and it's brought to you by Body Armor. Gear up this fall with Body Armor sports drink, more than just a sports drink. And we talked about Travis Etienne. I have Travis Etienne as stock up, and I agree with a lot of the stuff that Field said earlier. When you look at the touches and the usage, it is more of a split than it had been before. But I think that, to me, is the point. Travis Etienne was not somebody that I was looking at as a flex play in the previous weeks. And now with bye weeks coming up and with this increased usage, I see Travis Etienne as someone that was on my bench waiting for me to see something happening, to somebody that I think I could play in my flex as bye weeks hit with this increased usage. Now, obviously, you're going to have to temper expectations. This is not him taking on the full-time workload. But whatever you were thinking of with Travis Etienne through the first 5 weeks, better days are ahead. And he's someone that I would technically use as a flex play in these bye week situations. Field, I know you already talked about it, but any conversations or questions there? Because I think we saw it the same way. You don't want to say too much on Travis Etienne, because of Brian Robinson, but because of James Robinson, but I still like him as someone that I think wasn't a flex guy before, and now with bye weeks coming up. I think he's usable.
Yeah, the only way that I think he unlocks is if he gets a lot of passing game utilization. And I'm skeptical that's going to happen because it's 5 games in and we haven't seen a ton. And then 2 is, like, if there's one thing Jacksonville has, it's a ton of pass catchers, right? Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, Marvin Jones, still a really good player in the NFL who's like their 4th option right now in the passing game. So I'm skeptical that's going to happen for Travis Etienne. Stock up, but as I mentioned earlier, not too far, which is kind of how the world is right now,
That's
right?
sort of
Like there
how
are a
it's
couple
at.
stocks that are up, but no stock is up that high these days, is there?
Not super high, no,
Yeah.
in all honesty. Other than Eric Moody's stock, we're going to get to him next. But first, Field, help me pay some bills.
Let's do it, Daniel. And football season brings many traditions we know and love. Touchdown dances, the pick six, the thick six, game-winning field goals, the Lions breaking Daniel's heart. And watching it all with friends in a cooler full of Miller Lite, the action on the field is reliable year after year. Pair it with the most reliable light beer. Every Sunday or Monday or Thursday or late in the season Saturdays is game time. It's Miller time. Miller time means good friends, great beer, and football all Sunday long. What could be better? Since 1975, Miller Lite has been a mainstay in the stadium, at the tailgate, and in your fridge. No matter how your team plays, it's the beer that's always a winner because of the Beer Drinkers Light Beer. With only 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12-ounce serving, your only concern is the next third down conversion. And hey, Daniel's Lions are on a bye this week.
Hey.
You don't have to worry about them losing. Miller Lite tastes like beer because if you're a beer lover, you don't want watered-down flavor. You want the original light beer. Football season brings back the big hits, so reach for the biggest hit of them all, Miller Lite. You can find Miller Lite pretty much everywhere beer is sold, or go to MillerLite.com/FFF for delivery options near you. It's Miller time. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces.
Football season is here, and nothing beats seeing your favorite team live. Not only does Vivid Seats have great NFL ticket prices, they're also the official ticketing partner of ESPN. And with Vivid Seats rewards, when you buy 10 tickets, you get the 11th one free. Download the app or visit vividseats.com today. Vivid Seats. Life happens live. Receive a reward credit equal to the average price of the 10 tickets purchased, excluding taxes, fees, and processing costs. See vividseats.com/rewards for terms and conditions. All right, and we welcome in our good friend Eric Moody to talk about the Week 6 waiver wire. Eric, how you doing, big guy?
You know what? I'm doing pretty good. Fortunately, I did not have to play against Travis Kelce in a fantasy football league this week, so
Lucky
it was
you.
fun watching those fireworks, I must admit.
Yeah, heck yeah, man. If you had anybody in that game, you were definitely sweating it out because there were a lot of fantasy points scored. It was a really good one for Monday Night Football. Let's talk about waiver wire here for Week 6, and let's start at the quarterback position. We've talked how waiting on quarterback this year has really put you in a tough spot. If you waited and waited and waited, and now you've probably been streaming a lot of guys. So here in Week 6, who is the quarterback that you're targeting off the waiver wire?
Yeah, I would say the top quarterback on the waiver wire this week, and you've talked about him earlier, and that is Geno Smith with the Seattle Seahawks. And I must admit, I would have never anticipated we'd be talking about Geno Smith as a legitimate QB1 streamer this summer. I'm like, it was supposed to be Russell Wilson cooking, but Geno is preparing gourmet meals. We got like a ribeye steak. We got a twice baked potato. We got sauteed asparagus. I'm like, we've got a pretty good feast here. But I do like him quite a bit for a couple of reasons. For one, the Seahawks are throwing the football quite a bit. They look like they're averaging 31 passing attempts per game. And you look at Geno, I'm like, he's averaging 19.6 fantasy points per game. And I also like their upcoming schedule. They got 2 matchups against the Cardinals, play the Chargers, Giants, and Buccaneers. So it's a lot to like about Geno. But what are you thinking, Dopp?
No, I love Geno Smith. I mean, unfortunately for me as a Lions fan, he's carved us up, and then we've watched him continue it. Last week against the Saints, a much tougher defense than my Detroit Lions. At this point, like we've talked about, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, they've sort of worked themselves into lineup locks because of the way that Geno is playing. And until I don't see it anymore, with how bad that second half of like the QB tier has been, I think I have to trust Geno Smith because their defense is bad. They're going to have to throw a lot in order to keep up.
Exactly.
I'm totally with you from that standpoint. If you had someone like Jared Goff and he's now on bye, or you were doing that from a streaming standpoint, Geno is my quarterback that I would love to off the waiver wire. If you can't get him, though, Eric, is there another quarterback that you're looking at just in case Geno isn't there?
Yeah, I'm kind of smiling as I say this, but it would end up being Carson Wentz. I know he's available in a high percentage of ESPN leagues. So
Yep.
I'll put it to you like this, and I think you can relate to this, Dopp, and also people that are watching or listening, for where I think about Carson Wentz in my fantasy lineup. That makes my stomach a little bit queasy, like I'm eating sushi from like a gas station. But to make matters worse, it almost feels like I'm getting ready to, we'll say, get on Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, like in Disneyland or Disney World, after doing that.
Right.
I'm like, that's kind of how I feel.
Yeah.
But you can trust Carson Wentz, and here's why. Because in 3 of his 5 games, he scored 21-plus fantasy points. Now, in those other 2, he combined for only 16. But you look at how much they're passing the ball in Washington. Like, only the Jets and the Cardinals are averaging more passing attempts per game. But when I look at someone like Carson Wentz and the matchups that he has upcoming with the Bears on deck and then also the Packers, I think we're going to see the Carson Wentz that can get you 20-plus fantasy points in those matchups. And he's a great quarterback just to stream this week, or to pair with another quarterback like Geno Smith, perhaps, to play a quarterback by committee, just considering these dire times for fantasy football players.
Yeah, the best way to watch Carson Wentz, if you have to use him for a week, is through the box score. Don't actually watch the game. You don't want to put yourself through that.
Yeah.
But if you get into junk time and they've got to throw a whole bunch, it doesn't make a difference how good he looks as an actual quarterback. You're just worried about it from the fantasy perspective. So, Eric, from the running back perspective, if there is I feel like it's very obvious here, but if there is one running back that you were targeting, which Michigan State alumni would it be?
Oh, I don't know. Perhaps Kenneth Walker III. It's got to be Walker. I'm like, he's the top waiver wire pick for this week. If you're looking at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, it doesn't matter. Do what you can to get him. And so, I think the big thing is with Rashad Penny. And I must admit, as an ex-player, kind of watching him in tears on the cart, leaving the field, I'm like, you could sense the impact of the injury that took place. Mm-hmm. But I would say, looking at Walker moving forward, I'm looking at the rookie as a RB2 moving forward. I think he's a mid-range RB2. You look at Seattle, the running backs so far this year has averaged around 21 touches per game. And you would have to expect that Walker would end up getting the lion's share of that volume. Look what he was able to do in college. I'm like, he's a 3-down back caliber player. So he played in 32 collegiate games in college, some at Wake Forest, some at Michigan State. Looks like he finished with 3,069 total yards and 36 touchdowns between those 2 schools. And so I would do what you would have to do in fantasy to get Walker on your team. I think he has the potential, I would say, to be a league winner.
Agreed. He's one of those guys that coming in has a spot, a guaranteed number of opportunities, unfortunately, because of the Rashad Penny injury. And we don't see DJ Dallas as being a guy that's going to take, like you said, the lion's share of the workload is going to go to Kenneth Walker. DJ Dallas is going to be their pass catching back. I'm sure they'll bring someone else in, but they like this kid. I mean, they want to see what they have. They used a 2nd-round pick on him. So I think this is a great call, Eric. If you can't get Kenneth Walker because someone grabs him, is there another running back? Got to grab someone either for this week or for the future that you like here in week 6.
Yeah, I would go ahead and pick up Mike Boone. I know with the Broncos playing on Thursday, we've kind of forgotten about that matchup. But I'm like, it was obviously a committee between Boone and Melvin Gordon. You look at Boone, I'm like, he finished with 85 total yards on 10 touches. Played a similar number of snaps to Melvin Gordon. But I think the bigger takeaway at the end of that game, our very own Adam Schefter broke this news, is that when you look at Russell Wilson playing with a partially torn lat near his right shoulder, and I think that's obviously going to impact the passing game moving forward, and perhaps they could lean more on the run. And so I do like Boone quite a bit if you're unable to get Kenneth Walker. He's still available in a high percentage of ESPN leagues right now.
All right, let's talk wide receivers here really quickly to wrap things up. We've got Michael Gallup, which I love to be able to see. I think this is in part with Dak Prescott potentially being able to come back. Maybe this Dallas Cowboys offense looks different. But you're telling me that Michael Gallup, Dak Prescott's potential number 2 wide receiver, is available for free on the waiver wire to people right now.
Yeah, it's shocking looking at those numbers. But I think a lot of fantasy managers may be enamored by Noah Brown and what he's been able to do. But since Gallup's come back, I'm like, his snaps haven't been as high as Noah Brown, but he's still running a very similar number of routes, and he's getting more targets. And just to close the loop on that briefly, it really comes down to this stat that I put in the waiver wire column from last week, and I repeated it this week, is that you got Michael Gallup with 31 career games where he's had 6 or more targets. In those games, he's averaged 69 receiving yards and 14 fantasy points per game, and he had 5 targets against the Rams. So I anticipate for this week we're going to hit that 6 or more target range. and the results, as Loki would say in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, will be glorious.
They will be glorious. All right, if you cannot get Michael Gallup, is there another wide receiver here that you like in week 6?
Got to go with my guy, George Pickens. I love what I'm seeing out of Pickens. I'm like, over the past 2 games, he's caught 12 of 16 targets for 185 receiving yards. Obviously has a lot of rapport with quarterback Kenny Pickett. I just expect that to grow and to continue. And with the Steelers' upcoming schedule, they're going to find themselves trailing quite a bit. And so if he's still available and you need a wide receiver, do not hesitate to pick up George Pickens.
Yeah, they got a tough schedule coming up, but if you're picking up somebody from this standpoint, like this, there's a lot of upside, right? You're looking at somebody towards the end of the year. Maybe if they're going to be playing from behind a whole bunch, they got a rookie quarterback. You never know what's going to happen. And we've watched George Pickens be really stinking good, Eric. Like, he's made some unbelievable plays so far as a rookie. So it's a fun guy to be able to root for. All right. Tough call time here with you and I. We're going to run through this really quickly. If you are picking up any of those players, you might have to make a drop. You might have to go through and decide someone doesn't make the roster anymore. So at the quarterback position, we got a couple of people listed here. Would you drop the following quarterbacks for Geno Smith or Carson Wentz off the waiver wire this week? We're going to start with Jared Goff, 71% rostered. And maybe I'll take this. That feels like an easy yes to me because of the fact Jared Goff goes into a bye this week, right? Going into a bye, easy to be able to dump him and grab one of those guys. The tougher question, I think, for both of us is Russell Wilson. Is he at the point where you can drop him from your roster, or is he still just a bench and you need to roster someone else because there's the potential that Russ could still be Russ and this offense still has some really good skill position guys, Eric? You know what I mean? Like, that's the dilemma.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. It pains me to say, but just given the shoulder injury, I would drop Russell Wilson for someone like Geno Smith because Geno Smith, with the way he's performing, he can position your fantasy team at quarterback to win. So I would go with Geno. Sorry, Russell Wilson, going to have to dump you.
All right, let's run over to the running back position. Let's say you're picking up Ken Walker. Couple guys here. Cam Akers has been brutal for fantasy managers. I already talked about him earlier in the show with Squirrel Stock and the schedule they're going to get. Are you comfortable dropping either Cam Akers or even Chase Edmonds for Ken Walker this season?
Yeah, no, I'm very comfortable with dropping both of those running backs. You look at their opportunity share in that backfield. It's just not consistent. It's not good, so I would dump them for Kenneth Walker.
What about Michael Carter? We've watched Breece Hall kind of come on. Michael Carter hasn't disappeared. He got a couple touchdowns near the goal line because Breece Hall got him all the way down there, and then Michael Carter was able to cash in on it. But he's another guy that I'm having a tough one with because if you're looking, Ken Walker is someone that would potentially start for you. But it's not like Michael Carter doesn't have value. Making the tough call, though. If you need to drop someone like Michael Carter, are you okay with it for a guy like Ken Walker?
Yeah, no, I'm okay with that. It's all about potential and that upside. Walker's got it, and so I think Breece Hall's going to continue to take over the backfield, so I would drop Carter.
All right, what about for wide receivers? Can you give me a couple of names at wide receivers that you potentially would say, hey, it's all right getting rid of this guy if I'm going to grab a Michael Gallup or a George Pickens?
Yeah, it's a couple of names that come to mind. Obviously, Allen Robinson. I know we've talked a lot about him on the show and in general. So I would drop him. Targets aren't there. Elijah Moore, someone who we had hope for to have a breakout season. He's yet to have 10 points so far this year. I would drop him. And last but not least, you're looking at Tyler Boyd. I love Tyler Boyd as a player. When he gets the targets, he is productive. But when you're playing alongside T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, the volume will not be there consistently. And so I would prefer to have someone like Michael Gallup on the team, or even like George Pickens, on my fantasy team. So.
And all these guys that we talk about saying we're comfortable with dropping them doesn't mean like run out and you need to drop them. It's like, hey, if you've got to make a decision on how to make your team better, sometimes you got to make a tough call. And this guy is someone that we feel comfortable based on what's happened and what we are projecting could be coming forward with their production. So, Eric, appreciate you, man. Thank you for going back and forth with this with me. We've got the waiver wire. Go check that out every Tuesday. Eric, you also do your daily notes column. Where do people find that? ESPN.com/fantasy. Is there anywhere specific in there, or is it up at the top every single day?
Yeah, typically when it publishes, it's early in the morning. For Eastern time, you're looking at between like 7:30 to 8:30 Eastern in the morning. So it'll be on the top of the page, gives you a recap of what you missed news-wise, fantasy-relevant news the day before. And, of course, you can find a waiver wire column there as well. So, and also, if you're big on social media, just reach out on Twitter at Eric and Moody. If you like football, fantasy, and 1990s nostalgia, you'll be right at home.
You'll be right at home with Eric. That is right. A little bit of music, too. Like you can throw some music in there with Eric. Him and I are both big music guys. All right, thank you so much for hanging out with us to the end of this Tuesday show. We love being able to do this. Fantasy football is just so much fun. I love being able to do this with all of my friends. We hope that you come back tomorrow. We're going to be back with Liz Loza and Stephania, Field, and I talking all the Week 6 rankings. People that we like, people that we don't like. Where are we at on everybody heading into all of these games? We love you guys. Have a safe week. We'll see you tomorrow.